The first thing I heard on my very first day as a homeowner wasn't birds or sprinklers or the squeak of a garage door. It was a woman's voice ripping across the street like a siren. "You can't live here." I still had the key fob warm in my hand. Still had that stupid grin you wear when a decade of saving finally turns into a driveway with your name on it. And here came this lady across the lawn like a referee sprinting to throw a flag. She didn't slow down, didn't say hello, just planted herself at my bumper and jabbed a finger at my face like I'd broken into her mother's jewelry box. "Ma'am," I said, window half down, trying to keep it light. "I literally closed an hour ago." "Not on that house," she shot back, eyes bright and wild. "That house belongs to my family. You've made a mistake. Leave before this gets ugly. My name's Evan. I work in IT, married to Laura, who's a nurse, and for 6 long months we'd been outbid by cash buyers with smug smiles and waived inspections. When this 2-story place in a pine hollow popped up under market with the nicest old trees I've ever seen shading a front yard, we didn't ask why the price felt like a sale tag. Maybe we should have, but we jumped. We told ourselves we deserved a little luck, right? A motivated seller, a clean title, a quiet street where you can hear the wind in the oaks. That was the dream I parked on. The woman, she later introduced herself as Margaret Shaw, didn't care about my dream. She pointed at the gable like it was a crime scene. "That home is part of the Cedar Grove Neighborhood Association," she announced. "And as acting president, I'm ordering you to vacate while we sort out this fraud." I pulled the folder from the passenger seat. "Margaret, right? This parcel was never annexed. It predates your HOA by like 15 years. I tried to smile as I flipped to the county map with lot lines highlighted in neon yellow, my weekend printout hobby suddenly coming in handy. Different covenants, different everything. "Not your jurisdiction." She stared at the paper like it was written in smoke. "Maps can be wrong," she said, which is a sentence that tells you everything about a person. She pulled out her phone, dialed someone, and said without a hello, "Board members to my house now. We have a hostile occupier." 15 minutes later, 3 cars rolled up and a little quorum formed on her lawn. Polo shirts, clipboards, that earnest HOA look. To their credit, they were civil. They examined my deed, cross-checked their binder, and one of them, an older guy with kind eyes, cleared his throat and told Margaret, "He's in the right. The Henderson parcel was never incorporated." Margaret's jaw flexed. She had that smile that looks like it hurts. "We'll see," she said to me, and it didn't sound like a promise. It sounded like a threat wrapped in cotton. On the drive home that night, I had that jittery feeling you get after an argument you didn't plan to have. Laura listened, eyebrows inching north, then squeezed my hand on the center console. "If this is the welcoming committee," she said, "maybe we need a camera before we need a couch." So we ordered a video doorbell, 2 side cams, and a floodlight. And I told myself we were being thorough, not paranoid. The next morning, a text pinged from an unknown number. "Don't trust anything Margaret tells you about that house. Document everything. She's dangerous. No name, no follow-up, just that." I stared at it too long. Felt the skin on my arms prickle. I'm the guy at work who tells people not to click unknown links. And here I was, treating a ghost text like a lighthouse. Moving day should be boxes and pizza and tripping over your own optimism. Ours started with Margaret standing on the sidewalk with a measuring tape like the world's angriest surveyor, dragging the metal end across my fence post, scribbling on a form. "You're out of setback," she said without looking up. "It's not in your HOA," I said again, breathing in for 4, out for 4, like my therapist once suggested for traffic and in-laws. "City ordinance," she said. "And grandfather clauses lapse when a property changes hands. You'll need to reapply for compliance." That night, I learned a new phrase: weaponizing bureaucracy. A pink slip from code enforcement arrived 3 days later for improper trash container placement. The week after that, unapproved exterior color, even though we hadn't painted a thing. Then, untidy lawn. Which was funny because we'd watered the lawn like it was a dying patient and trimmed the edges with the precision of a haircut before a job interview. I called the city, sat through the phone tree, and finally got a human. When I gave our address, she sighed. New owner? She asked, like she already knew the answer. Best advice I can give, appeal and bring evidence and keep records. So we kept records. I set my cameras to archiving mode. I bought a binder the size of a phone book and labeled tabs, like I was building a case against a cartoon villain. The cameras caught Margaret stepping onto our porch to measure the distance between the trash can and the railing at 6:12 a.m. captured her snapping photos through our side gate at dusk. Filmed her coaching a neighbor in a cardigan about how to properly document a noise violation while birds chirped in a way that did not scream riot. When Laura called after a brutal shift and asked, "How's my favorite homeowner doing?" I told her I'd been promoted to full-time evidence clerk. Then came the part that twisted my stomach. My boss pinged me for a quick Zoom. "Evan," he said, careful voice. "Someone called the office with concerns about your disruptive behavior in the neighborhood and its impact on our company's local clients." I felt my ears buzz. Disruptive? I showed him the binder on camera. I told him about the untidy lawn letter for our perfectly crisp yard. He believed me, thank God. But it told me Margaret wasn't just trying to make our life uncomfortable. She was trying to unravel it thread by thread. That night, the unknown number texted again. "She's done this before. 3 families in 2 years? Same pattern. Harass, isolate, force a sale to a preservation trust." The words landed like a file slammed on a desk. I dug into public records the way only a caffeinated IT guy can. I found the trust. Evergreen Preservation Trust. Clean logo, bland mission statement, lots of talk about protecting neighborhood character. I also found 4 deeds where the seller had taken 20 to 50 grand below market. 2 with medical liens on the sellers. 1 where the seller had lost a job. Patterns don't prove intent, but they do make your pulse thump. I knocked on an apartment door 2 blocks away to meet one of those sellers. A woman in her 50s named Caroline, who looked like she'd slept with worry under her pillow. She didn't want to talk at first. When I mentioned Margaret, she ushered me in like I was a paramedic. Her hands shook around a mug. "My husband started chemo," she said, eyes fixed on a spot on the wall, "and the violations came every Friday like bills. Grass too long, gutters too old, paint too faded." A neighbor, Margaret, offered to help by connecting us with a buyer who understood. We sold. We thought we were escaping. I still wake up thinking there's a notice on my door. There's a certain kind of anger that doesn't make you loud. It makes you clear. I walked back in the dusk with a list in my head and a plan in my hand. Step 1, a lawyer. Sarah Walsh, real estate attorney. Sharp eyes, easy laugh that she used sparingly. She listened, asked surgical questions, flipped through my binder, and by tab 3, the laugh was gone. "Evan," she said, "this is not a neighbor's spat. You're describing intentional interference with property rights, possibly civil conspiracy. If there's a public official in this," she tapped a violation notice, "that's a different ball game. We filed appeals. We filed a harassment report. We drafted a petition for a restraining order against Margaret that Sarah said we'd keep in our back pocket." I slept for the first time in weeks. Margaret, sensing the shift, went harder. She held meetings in her garage with printouts and clipboards. My side camera caught the shape of 5 people at a folding table under a shop light like they were planning a heist. She trained them to observe and report with specific language, handed out a schedule that, when I zoomed in on the footage, made my jaw tighten. Monday morning trash. Tuesday dusk lawn. Thursday late-night disturbances. It wasn't community upkeep. It was choreography. Then the anonymous number called, the first time, voice low and disguised like it had been run through a guitar pedal. "She's filing for a restraining order," the voice said. "Claims you threatened her. Judge could remove you from your home temporarily. She did it to a widower on Alder Lane. Be ready." The petition landed on a Thursday like a storm warning. Margaret outlined aggressive confrontations, included 3 neighbor statements that read like identical homework, and attached clips I recognized from my own security feed. Except they'd been trimmed like a bad haircut. Gone were her steps over my property line, her measuring my porch at dawn. All that remained were frames of me stepping forward saying, "Please get off my property," stripped of context until I looked like a man spoiling for a fight. It's a sick feeling seeing your own life turned into a weapon against you. Sarah rolled in a cart with a projector the morning of the hearing like a teacher who knew the lesson plan would save a life. The courtroom was cold in that institutional way. Margaret played nervous like a symphony, voice quivering, hands clasped in a way that felt rehearsed. Her lawyer spoke about community safety and disturbing behavior, and for a minute, if I'm being honest, I felt the story tilting. Then Sarah stood, straightened a stack of papers, and said, "Your Honor, we have full unedited footage to provide context to Ms. Shaw's selected clips." We played the tape. The big screen showed Margaret's heel crossing our property line by a yard, her tape measure clicking against my rail, her whisper to a neighbor. "You have to say you felt threatened." Those words matter. The judge's eyebrows climbed. Then Sarah introduced Exhibit H, high-resolution photos, time-stamped, date-stamped, of Margaret at a coffee shop sliding what sure looked like an envelope across to a uniformed code inspector I recognized from our notices. The photos were too clean to be chance, Sarah's voice was calm as she explained. "We received these minutes ago from a confidential source. They appear to show Ms. Shaw engaging in misconduct with a public official connected to this case. The room changed temperature." Margaret's lawyer objected. The judge took a recess, studied the photos in chambers, then came back with the kind of controlled anger that makes you wish you'd told the truth earlier. Petition denied with prejudice. Referral to the district attorney for investigation into potential corruption. A warning to Margaret about perjury. And on the way out, a quiet apology from the bailiff to me that tasted like water in a desert. Word rolls fast in a neighborhood that's been tense for too long. That night, clusters formed on corners where people hadn't lingered in months. Security videos were compared like baby photos. A retired couple brought out an accordion file of notices they'd been too embarrassed to show anyone. At an emergency HOA meeting, residents stood one by one and described the private dread that had kept them silent. They voted to remove Margaret as president. 28-1. And I'll let you guess the one. After the meeting, I noticed a man standing where the streetlight doesn't quite reach. Hands in jacket pockets. Posture patient. Not suspicious, intentional. He didn't move until the crowd thinned, then crossed with an easy gait and a face you'd forget in a lineup. "Evan," he said, "I'm Michael Hale." Something about the last name tugged at a memory of deed pages and obituaries. Hale. Grace Henderson's nephew. The previous owner who'd lived there 45 years before passing. He nodded. "I've been the one texting," he said, not sheepish at all, just steady. "I tried to stop her when my aunt was alive. I was late. I figured the next best thing was making sure she never did it again." We sat on my steps, two men who'd both loved the same house for different reasons, drinking the kind of silence that feels like mercy. Michael opened a messenger bag and laid out a portfolio so organized. It made my binder look like kindergarten art. Timelines of violations across multiple neighborhoods, spreadsheets of transfers into and out of the Evergreen Trust, photos of coffee shop meetings with more than one inspector, affidavits from a widow in Cedar Glen and a teacher in Laurel Bend who'd both sold 16% under market after months of compliance escalations. He'd worked with a journalist, with an investigator, with my attorney months before I'd ever Googled HOA bylaws. "You used me as bait," I said. Not an accusation, just a fact that needed air. "I gave you warning and tools," he said. "You chose to stand your ground. Most people can't. Not because they're weak, because life is heavy and systems are exhausting." He looked at the trees. "My aunt planted those oaks with her husband in '82. She stopped gardening in her last months because she was afraid Margaret would photograph her yard neglect. No one should be afraid of their own dirt. We built something after that. Not a vigilante club, not a pitchfork crowd, just a neighborhood with better habits. We set up a watch that watched the watchers. We taught folks how to appeal a bogus notice, who to CC on a letter so it doesn't disappear, which words in a complaint are red flags. The city, suddenly very cooperative with a district attorney peering over its shoulder, reassigned 2 inspectors, suspended 1, and created a transparent online log you can read without a password. Funny how sunlight makes paper trails skitter like roaches. A reporter called one afternoon, and by that evening the local news had a headline about alleged code enforcement corruption in Pine Hollow, which is a mouthful but far better than neighborhood drama. Margaret's husband. Greg, an accountant who looked like a man waking up, cooperated. Explained he'd signed trust documents thinking he was diversifying retirement, not underwriting a shakedown. I watched him testify with a grief that'll take him years to wash out. Predators don't just hurt strangers. They hollow their own homes. Laura and I got our lives back in increments. A full night's sleep. Coffee on the porch without scanning the street. Our dog snoring like a lawnmower on the rug without leaping up at every car door thump. I don't think you realize how much your body has been bracing until it finally unclenches and your shoulders drop an inch. People ask if I ever felt guilty that Michael put us in the line of fire on purpose. Sometimes when I'm feeling noble, I say it was an honor to help break a pattern. Sometimes when I'm honest, I say I wish someone else had bought this house first. Most of the time, I think about Caroline and her shaking mug, and about Grace and the Oaks. And I land somewhere in the middle. Grateful we could do what others shouldn't have to. Angry that it was even necessary. We still get comments online about HOAs and power and where the line is between keeping a neighborhood nice and turning it into a private fiefdom. I don't hate HOAs. I hate when they become costumes people wear to make their meanness look like civic duty. Order isn't the same as ownership, and community standards mean nothing if they're only ever weaponized against the people least able to fight back. A month after the hearing, I got a postcard from Laurel Bend signed by 3 families. No return address, just 3 names and a sentence. We saw your story and we're not selling. I showed it to Laura, and she pressed it to the fridge with a magnet shaped like a little red bird. Then we went out front and watered the elderflower bush someone had gifted us, because our porch had looked for too long like a place where joy was not allowed. I'm telling you all this not because I like drama, but because a lot of us move to streets like mine for quiet, and then when quiet breaks, we think maybe it's our fault that we can hear the noise. It isn't. Sometimes the loudest person in the cul-de-sac is just the one who learned how to make a clipboard sound like a badge. Sometimes the right thing to do is very boring. Save emails, label tabs, appeal again. Show up at a meeting, and then show up at the next one. Sometimes the most rebellious sentence you can say is simply, "That doesn't apply to me," and then back it up with a map. So here's my question for you. If you pulled into your brand new driveway and someone told you you couldn't live there, would you pack back up to keep the peace, or would you dig in and fight, knowing it might get messy before it gets better? Where's your line between standards and control, between neighborly care and nosy tyranny? Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories.